rounds that he knocked Tyson Fury down in. Maybe if you're looking at it from a Wilder perspective as a fan, you might be able to give him a few more rounds and then say a couple downs in there and a draw. So the draw in the fight, I mean, it wasn't an absolute robbery, but you know, it's most people and anyone that watches boxing regularly is going to give that fight to Tyson Fury. But importantly, in the first round, in the last round in that fight, after Fury's been knocked down, got up, and proceeded to win the rest of the round, and he actually hurt Wilder. And this is where I think he realized that if you attack Deontay Wilder, don't give him the space, fight him on the inside, he's pretty much useless. And of course, that was backed up by Freddie Roach, who was in Tyson Fury's corner that night and came out afterwards and said that he was not 100% happy with Ben Davidson's tactics. And he thought that Fury should have attacked Wilder more, had gone on the front foot. So I think, I think the first Luis Ortiz fight was the nail in the coffin for Deontay Wilder. And although Tyson Fury didn't fight in the first fight like he did in the second fight, I think in the first fight he realized that this was the way to fight Deontay Wilder. So he left Ben Davidson, went to the Kronk Gym, who obviously are notorious for, Emmanuel Stewart and, fighters fighting the way they do, the most, having trained people such as Lennox Lewis and Vladimir Klitschko, among many other names. But those are the most recent ones, the most high profile ones. So in the second fight between these two guys, I have to admit, I didn't think Fury was going to fight the way that he did. I wanted him to do it. But, this is really, have you seen a Tyson Fury fight that he's fought so much on the front foot?
No, the only one that comes to my memory was, I think it was his second fight against Derek Chisora. Albeit Derek Chisora was tired on the fight and he was blowing quite a lot. But I think that's the only other way I've seen Fury fight like that, was that fight.
Yeah. Well, I thought in the second fight, Tyson Fury, because the first fight with Wilder, I thought that was maybe 60% Tyson Fury. And if Wilder can't beat him, then he won't beat him. So going into the second fight, I was extremely confident that Tyson Fury would win that fight. But of course, you never can be 100% because fighting is fighting. And there's a certain amount of luck in fighting, right? It might not might be a huge percentage, but when you're Deontay Wilder and you hit as hard as he does, then you've always got the chance. But it was, I didn't expect that to be so one-sided. And really, Tyson Fury beat the absolute dog shit out of Deontay Wilder. And
I think that probably brings us on really. Where can Wilder really realistically go? He's 34 now. Granted, that's not that old for a heavyweight, but coming off a defeat as he is, surely the rematch is going to go one way, and that's going to be another loss for him. Really, this could be his career over.
I would think so. I can't see, if Deontay Wilder has not learned how to box by now, I don't think that he ever will. But it's not just that. It's Deontay Wilder is, and I criticize people here, and the guy would beat the shit out of me. But he is technically the worst heavyweight boxer I think I've ever seen. Can you think of another boxer that technically is that bad?
No, especially not one that won probably the most prestigious heavyweight title in the WBC.
Yeah, well, sorry. When I say boxer, I meant to say heavyweight champion.
No.
because there have been some bad ones over the years, right? But
Yeah.
at least at least they could, technically they were pretty good. And so after the first fight, Fury, that's that was a cherry pick from Deontay Wilder. He did it his whole career, and he did it now. They thought they'd get Tyson Fury when he was at his worst, and they'd have that big name on his record, and then the end game for them was the fight with Joshua, and they could go back and try and get more money, and it backfired, and it backfired hugely, to the
Yeah.
point where now that the only fight that people want to see is Joshua versus Fury.
Yeah, and going back to Deontay Wilder, I'm just looking at his last 4 or 5 fights, albeit he fought Luis Ortiz twice and Fury twice. Up until then, his fight previously was against Bermane Stiverne and then Gerard Washington. So it highlights the fact where you suggest he has cherry-picked his opponent. And Luis Ortiz was about 70 when he fought him, so... Really, there's not anyone credible on Wilder's record, especially when you compare that with the likes of Fury and Anthony Joshua.
Yeah, there isn't anyone credible on Deontay Wilder's record. Now, people say Bermane Stiverne is a credible opponent, and I'm sorry, I'm not buying that, right? If people are not giving Joshua credit for beating Charles Martin, then I'm sorry, Deontay Wilder doesn't get credit for beating Bermane Stiverne, because I think Charles Martin would beat Bermane Stiverne, and I think he would beat him quite easily.
Yeah. Granted, it was 3 years later. I thought that Joe Joyce beat Stiverne better than what Wilder done.
Oh, yeah. I mean, lots of people have. The thing with Wilder is, that second fight, and as great as a fight as it was, and I've watched it during lockdown, right? I was furloughed in May.
Yeah.
And I must have watched Fury v Wilder 2 dozens of times, right? Because it gets better every time you watch it. But the whole show and the lead up to it was so bad. You had I think it was the final press conference, right? I think it was Black History Month in America. So you had Deontay Wilder bringing up the whole, race thing involved. So, which, thank God, Tyson Fury shot that down. He wasn't even asked, the question he was asked, I can't remember what it was, but it was a different question to the previous one that Deontay Wilder was asked. And he made a point of interjecting and saying, look, hold on a minute, to that last question, this is not about race. This is about two guys fighting each other, right?
Yeah.
And then, so Deontay Wilder decides to have an entrance where he has some god-awful rapper singing some garbage coming into the ring, wearing some ridiculous suit or gown or whatever you want to call it. And it's literally, from what followed, from getting the absolute crap beaten out of him, the whole thing made Deontay Wilder look so bad, so embarrassing. It was incredible. And Tyson Fury's entrance wasn't that much better, to be fair. I mean, he came down to the ring sitting on a throne with a crown on, and by the time he got into the ring, and you just thought, well, at least the fight was a lot better than the entrances was. And it was just, I thought it was poor. The whole build up and the entrances into the ring. But I thought the fight was great because Wilder got what he deserved.
Yeah, I think the fight saved the fight week, as it were. I'm not sure what the pay-per-view number's done over here, but I don't think it's comparable to compare the BT boxing coverage to Sky.
No, and that's the tricky thing. Fighting in Vegas, 5 o'clock in the morning. And again, I'll tell you another funny story just to digress for a second. So I was really looking forward to watching this fight, right?
Yeah.
Because I pretty much knew that Deontay Wilder was going to lose this fight. I thought it would go 12 rounds, and I thought Tyson Fury would just box his head off, right? So I was excited. I would have been happy if that had happened. So anyway, I'm sitting up. I stayed up all night, had a few beers, texting one of my friends, blah blah blah. You know, really, really, really anticipating this fight. And then I was watching the ring entrances, and the next thing I know, it was morning, right? And I had missed the fight. So I'd fallen asleep. I was sitting there, compos mentis, and then the next thing I know, I KO'd and I missed the fight.
That actually happened to me as well, funnily
Oh,
enough.
did it?
Yeah, I was all geared up to watch it, and the next thing, I must have left my TV on, and then the thing I remember about it was David Hay, because they had the BT studio, didn't they?
Yeah.
And it was him saying, "Oh, how we're making it about himself, how he was proved wrong, and how I think he had a bet with John Fury or something."
Yeah.
And that was my memory of the fight night, really.
Yeah, that was me. So, well, I woke up at 9 a.m. in the morning, or 9:30 a.m., and I woke up and I was like, "Oh my God, I've missed this fight," and I paid for it as well, right?
Yeah.
So luckily there was a rerun at 10 a.m. So 30 minutes later, I made myself a cup of tea and I rewatched it, you know, in live. But by that time, I'd known the result because I was texting a few people about this, and I texted one of my friends, and I was texting him early on, and we were debating whether Tyson Fury would win boxing or if he was going to do what he said he was going to do and knock Deontay Wilder out. And I'd said to him, I really, 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 really hope that Tyson Fury does what he says he's going to do and knock him out, but I can't see it happening. I said to him, I really wish this would happen. So when I woke up and I realized I'd missed the fight, first thing I did was check my phone. And then the friend that I was texting had texted me. He'd obviously stayed up to watch the fight and said, "You got your wish." So I knew there and then that Tyson Fury had knocked him out before I actually watched the fight.
Yeah. I haven't got a good track record when it comes to watching heavyweight fights that are in America, because when Anthony Joshua lost to Andy Ruiz, I was on holiday, and our return date was the 2nd of June, so the day after.
Ah, right, okay.
So and our flight was an early flight home. So I got up about 5. It was in Spain, and then I see on social media that Anthony Joshua lost. But I couldn't believe it, because one of my pals, he was messaging me, and he was saying he's lost, and I presumed he was speaking about someone like Callum Smith on the undercard.
Yeah.
So then I looked on my Twitter, and it was all over the place, the result. I couldn't believe it.
Well, that was I stayed up for that fight and I didn't fall asleep, but it's a weird thing, and you know, like I say this to people, and people are like, yeah, you know, you're talking crap, but I watched that fight live, and from the you know, there was a delay in Joshua's ring entrance, and then when he came out, he looked like he just would rather have been anywhere else but there. So I actually thought to myself, Joshua is going to lose this fight, because there was something. Now I don't want to make excuses for Joshua, because that's not me, but something was up with him that night. Whether it was he wasn't motivated for the fight, or he had a bad camp, or he was nervous or something, but he was not himself that night. And I'm not saying if he was himself, he would have won the fight. That's not what I'm saying. But I could see straight away, you know, from as soon as his ring entrance was delayed, I knew something was up. And then when he came out, you know, he was getting his neck massaged and he was holding his gum shield out of his mouth. I was just like, Joshua is not where he needs to be here, and he could very easily lose this fight. Now, the reason people don't believe me when I say that is because they're like, oh yeah, Andy Ruiz is a fat bastard and everything. No, I actually knew who Andy Ruiz was, and I'd seen him box a few times. And I actually told a few people that were close to me that Andy Ruiz was going to be a harder fight than Jarrell Miller would have been.
Yeah.
And they didn't believe me because they didn't know who Andy Ruiz was. And I was like, well, you know, I know that he's got incredibly fast hands, right? You know, he might be fat, but he's still a good fighter. He's only lost one fight, which is arguable that he even lost it. And he's Mexican, right? So that, you know, what, not to be stereotypical, but most people know that Mexican boxers are tough and they've got good chins, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's just something that's well known around boxing if you know boxing, you know. And the fact that Joshua knocked him down was a feat in itself. But anyway, without turning it into a Joshua thing here, I want to stay on Fury Wilder. Yeah, I mean, just I don't want to see the third fight under
No.
under normal circumstances. I don't want to see it, but I take it now because I mean I'm dying to see something, right? Because we
Yeah.
haven't seen anything for months. But under normal circumstances, I don't want to see it. I don't think that Deontay Wilder would have any chance of winning again. And this is the thing, like in the build-up, I meant to raise this earlier, but in the build-up, you know, they were saying Tyson Fury has to be perfect for 12 rounds. Deontay Wilder has to be perfect for 2 seconds. And it's like, what kind of strategy is that to take into a boxing match, right? How could you, you know, how can you take that as, it's incredible. It's incredible how you can just go in there and think I'm just going to knock this guy out and that'll be it, especially at the elite level. It's beggars belief.
Yeah. Well, where do you stand on the whole Mark Braylon thing from the fallout of the fight about the whole
Well, I
throwing in the
actually thought,
towel?
oh well, I mean, I actually thought Mark Breland left it a couple of rounds too long
Yeah.
before he threw the towel in. But again, disgusting that when he did throw the towel in afterwards, you know, they threw him under the bus. You know, there was all sorts of stuff about he was friends with someone that was friends with Sugar Hill, and you know, and it's like, come on, guys, are we really, you know, a trainer is there to protect your fighter, and it doesn't matter if Deontay Wilder says, "Leave me in there, I'd rather die." Well, you know, it's, you know, it's one thing to say
Yeah.
to yourself, "I'd rather die." It's another thing for someone watching you that actually cares about you to let that happen, and it might have happened if that fight had gone on a few rounds longer, because Deontay Wilder wasn't even throwing punches back at Tyson Fury.
No.
And
No.
I would, you know, I would have. What would have happened if that had been Joshua in that ring rather than Fury? Because Joshua, although recently isn't quite as aggressive as he has been, but Joshua would have destroyed a Deontay Wilder that would on that night. I've got no doubt about that, right? You know,
Yeah.
Fury
I even
doesn't
think
hit his, yeah.
maybe a Dillian White could have beat him on
Oh
that
yeah.
night. How bad Wilder was, and he gives the excuse of his ring walk gear. But I don't think he can accept himself that he was just outboxed and outclassed by the better fighter, and it's going to happen again. I don't think he's come to terms with that the way he's acting even now.
And that's the thing about Deontay Wilder and why I just dislike the guy so much is what is actually wrong with just saying, look, you know, it didn't go for me tonight for whatever reason. You know, I thought the tactics. Just come out and say, I got beaten tonight. I'll go away, do some work, and we'll come back and we'll have the third fight. But to come out and say that, you know, the costume was too heavy, or my trainer's friends with such and such, it's like, you know, and this is the main reason why I don't think Deontay Wilder would win a third fight with Tyson Fury, is because if he really believes this, he would go into the next fight not having learned lessons from the second fight. You know, if you really, you know, you're going in and say, right, okay, as long as I don't wear a heavy costume again, I'm all of a sudden going to become the greatest heavyweight fighter of this era. It's not going to happen, mate. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. And I suppose it's the people he surrounds himself, because I think he genuinely believes that he's the best heavyweight on the planet himself. And self-belief is one thing, but I think he's a bit deluded.
Oh, I mean, that's being nice. I mean, that's being nice. I mean, deluded. Because I've got Wilder's record or resume in front of me, and again, literally, Luis Ortiz is the first fighter that he fights with a pulse. Right now, I mean, that's, you know, Bermane Stiverne, no. Gerald Washington, no. Chris Arreola, no. Arthur Spilka, no. Johan Duapa, no. You know, okay, yeah. I mean, don't mean to dismiss these people, but you're 40 fights in before you fight Tyson Fury, right? And you know, I'm looking through this, and this is terrible. This is absolutely terrible. So, how you get to here? You know, before he fights Bermane Stiverne. Okay, if you take Bermane Stiverne out of it, who was a world champion, who should have never been a world champion, but say you take Bermane Stiverne out of this, it's literally Tyson Fury. It's 41 fights in before he fights really a world level opponent, a world champion opponent. 41 fights.
Yeah, and that says it all. I think I'm right in saying before he went down the WBC route, I think he was mandatory, or he was ordered in the final eliminator against Vladimir Klitschko. And I think it's telling that he never took that fight.
Oh, well, I mean, they could have made, when he won the WBC belt, they could have made the Klitschko fight immediately, because I'm pretty sure Shelley Finkel was managing both fighters at that time.
Yeah, because he only fought for WBC because Vitali retired, didn't he?
Yeah, Vitali retired, and I think Bermane Stiverne and Chris Arreola fought for the vacant title.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
and Bermane Stiverne won, and then he came in and got it from there. But this is the difference between the likes of Deontay Wilder and Joshua and Tyson Fury as well. Well, okay, Tyson Fury not, because his career took a kind of different path. But Joshua won a world title against Charles Martin. Okay, had, you know, fought Dominic Breazeale, I think, who was unbeaten at the time.
Yeah.
You know, fought Eric Molina, and, you know, who wasn't unbeaten but had a good record, and then went into Vladimir Klitschko. It basically went in unified titles, whereas if Deontay Wilder just won the WBC belt and just continued to fight milkman, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's incomparable with Joshua's record. I think the 16th fight, was it that he fought Klitschko in the unification fight?
Yeah, 16th fight he beat Charles Martin, and before that, his 15th fight he beat Dillian Whyte. Now, Joshua doesn't get anywhere near enough credit for that, because you look at what Dillian Whyte's doing now. He's fought, beat everyone since, and he's been fighting some really good opposition, right?
Yeah,
and that was a one-sided fight for the most part, right? That was an ass whooping for Dillian Whyte in that fight, although he did have Joshua hurt in the second round. But for the majority of it, Joshua was whooping his ass, so to speak.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And as you say, how far Dillian Whyte's come on since then, it shows what a good win it was, because Unless maybe a Fury could do that to Dylan White or AJ again. But I don't see many heavyweights out there dominating Dillian White. Not the way he fights.
No,
anyway.
no one's come even close to doing that to Dillian White, and I don't think even if Joshua and White were to fight again, I don't think it would be the same fight as it was before.
No,
I think it would be much closer.
I think he's come on leaps and bounds since then, Dylan White, and potentially, depending if a belt ever becomes fragmented, I do believe that he can go on and win a world title himself.
Yeah, oh yeah. But that's another intriguing one, because obviously you have, you've got Wilder in the way. I just wish he would step aside so that we could have either Joshua v Fury or White v Fury, because White is obviously the mandatory coming up next year. So it'd be really, I would be really, I'm just as interested to see White versus Fury as I am Joshua v Fury, although Joshua v Fury is more interesting because it means that we'll have a world heavyweight champion, an undisputed world heavyweight champion, which hasn't been done for some considerable time.
No, I think it was it Lennox Lewis was the last one?
I think so, if I remember. Yeah, because the belts were held by Vladimir and Vitaly for a long time, and obviously they weren't going to fight each other.
No, but with the whole WBC with Dylan White just breaking off the Fury world a bit for a minute, I think that's just a bit disgusting, because he's been mandatory. Well, it's got to be coming up to 18 months now.
Oh, it's absolutely disgusting. I mean, and the whole Dylan White drugs test, did he fail thing, again, that was disgusting. After he was cleared, his mandatory position was just extended for a year.
Yeah, and I don't believe any other organisation would have done that with the whole making him wait and then allow Fury and Wilder to have 3 fights in the interim.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But the thing is, that's the problem. You've got four or five boxing organizations, and they've each got an agenda, and they're trying to keep Wilder. They were trying to keep Wilder first champion for as long as they possibly could, and it went longer than it should, and now it's not happened. And this third fight, as much, I mean, just going back to it, as much as I don't want to see it, I mean, these guys, it's going to take a huge haircut in money, right? Even if we didn't have the coronavirus and they decided to have a third fight again, I mean, I think half the people will watch it than they did before, right? Because who wants to pay for that again? Who wants to pay to watch a one-sided fight again?
I see something online the other day, I don't know how true it is, that it could potentially land up in Australia, their third fight of Fury and Wilder.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're 12 hours. They're 12 hours in front of us or behind us or whatever. So, 10 o'clock in the morning, 11 o'clock in the morning. Okay, yeah, we can watch it, but who's pissed at 11 o'clock in the morning wanting to watch a fight? Most people's children at 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday are either playing football or at dancing practice or at something. So, okay, people might buy it and record it, but it's just it. So you've got that to contend with, right? Saturday mornings are not good for ratings, right? People aren't sitting in their dressing gowns waiting for boxing to come on at 10 a.m. in the morning, 11 a.m. in the morning, or midday.
No, and especially with the American, their audience, that must be, well, same as us watching an American fight for Australia.
Yeah, well, okay, so Australia, if they're 12 hours from us, the States are 6 hours behind, 7 hours, depending on which part of America you live in. So that's they're getting up incredibly early. Again, it's 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning for them, right? They're not going to get up to watch that. It's not going to happen.
No, and in terms of views, I believe the first fight over here, because the figures aren't out for the rematch over here, the first fight done 250,000 buys UK.
Oh, is that the figures for the first fight? Is it?
Yeah, I don't know.
No, sorry, the second fight.
I believe that was the first one, and the second one done around 500,000 UK buys.
Okay, well, again, chop that in half again, because most people don't want to get up at 5 in the morning. Well, say if it's on at an unsociable time. Well, you're boxing hardcore fans, right? This is you obviously have the hardcore fans and the casual fans, right? Now, the boxing hardcore, I'm talking really hardcore fans, most of them won't be paying for this fight again, right?
No.
And then the casual fans will think, although they're casual fans, they know a bit about, they'll think, do I want to pay this money again to watch the same crap again? That's where most of the revenue will come from. But as I say, they won't be making anywhere near as much money as they would. I just think it's a pointless exercise, especially for Wilder, right? Wilder right now could get some step aside money, right? Now it might not be 10 million like they're talking about. He could get a few quid just to step aside, let Joshua and Fury fight. And in the deal, this is what everyone's talking about. If you step aside now, let them fight, and you'll get the winner. You'll fight the winner. Whereas if Wilder gets beat by Fury again, and then Fury fights Joshua, there's no guarantee Wilder's going to get another fight against either one of them, because he'll have lost twice. He'll have slipped down the rankings. He's going to have 2 or 3 fights to get things up again, and by that time he'll be 37, 38, and somebody's probably knocked him out already again, right?
Yeah, and as you say, he'll be 3 or 4 years older. I just think he's looking why he said he wants the 10 million. I don't know how much he's earned in his fight so far, but I think now he just wants a payday, and I think he'll be done with the sport. Wilder, that is.
Well, I mean, if that's what it takes to get rid of the guy, then okay, make a third fight, because the guy is no more a boxer than I am a joiner, right?
Yeah.
He's literally, and this is a sad thing, because to see Joshua not ever fight Wilder would be a travesty, because they spent a long time making that fight, and that fight should have happened. But it would be terrible for those 3 to have not ever fought each other.
Yeah, I think if Wilder ever did have the balls to step aside, I think that's the only way we will see Joshua potentially fighting him. Because as you say, I would say there's a high percentage, maybe not 100%, but Fury will beat him in the third fight. And then where does he go from there? Would he then fight Dillian Whyte? But then I suppose Dillian Whyte's got a good chance of beating Wilder. Then I suppose he's in the rounds of being a sort of journeyman then for the heavyweight contenders.
Yeah, that'd be incredible. Like, I would be laughing in a lot of people's faces for Deontay Wilder to become a journeyman, because I've had a lot of people say to me that, Joshua and the likes will just go over to America and get wiped out by this guy, and I'm like, oh my guys, are you kidding me? This guy can't fight to save his life. He can throw a punch and that's it. But being just a journeyman, incredible that could happen to Deontay Wilder. But it's not totally unexpected for the likes of people that. I'm just scrolling through some of these names on Deontay Wilder's record, and it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. For this guy to be given such high profile, having fought these people, it's
I'm
just,
amazed even
oh
the
my God.
WBC sanctioned some of these opponents for a world title.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, that's the thing. So he fought. So, okay, when did he win? Bermane Stiverne, he beat Bermane Stiverne, right? The first time. Eric Molina, Johan Duapa, Artur Spilka, Chris Arreola, Gerald Washington, right? Now, I am not, I wouldn't call myself hardcore to the fact that I know all the American fighters, right?
Yeah.
Now, I knew who Chris Arreola was. I knew who Artur Spilka was. I know who Johan Duapa was. I knew who Eric Molina was. But to fight Gerald Washington, this guy came out of absolutely nowhere. Had you ever heard of him before he fought Deontay Wilder?
No, but I believe he's promoted by Don King, wasn't he? So
Well, there you go, right?
yeah.
That says all you need to say about that.
Yeah, but
And
just going through his box route Wilder, maybe you can give him Molina as the first defence, and
yeah,
then probably from Dupois up till Luis Ortiz. You can't really say that they're credible world title defences.
no. You know, especially, we can't talk about Fury here because Fury didn't have any world title defenses, right?
No.
So before we get accused of turning this into something else, we can't. Fury vacated those belts, right?
Yeah.
And the reasons are well documented for why he did that. So we have to compare. The only next person we have to compare is Joshua because he's the other world champion. So Joshua beats Charles Martin, then fights his first fight. Was it Brazil? Was his first fight after? Now,
Yes. Yeah. I believe so.
okay, you may not think much of Dominic Brazil, but at the time, I think he was undefeated. He fights Eric Molina. Okay, you may not think much of Eric Molina, but I think he only had one loss, can bang a bit. So that's what, 17th, 18th, and then goes straight into the Vladimir Klitschko fight. In which case, and again, I say to people, and people don't believe me, and it's just because they don't know anything about boxing, is that the Vladimir Klitschko that fought Anthony Joshua, right, on that night, was the best Vladimir Klitschko I've ever seen, right?
Yes.
And I've followed Vladimir Klitschko's career. That was the best fight he has ever fought, right? And I thought at the time, because obviously those two were going to rematch. Joshua and Klitschko were going to rematch.
Yes.
Until Vladimir Klitschko retired. And I actually thought Klitschko shouldn't have retired. I thought, well, if Klitschko is still that good at his age, he should go away, try and get a fight with Deontay Wilder, win the WBC belt, and then come back and try to get a rematch with Joshua and try and get the undisputed fight. If I would challenge anyone that listens to this to show me another fight in which Vladimir Klitschko has performed better in his entire career.
Yeah. Again, I would say Vladimir Klitschko was probably my favourite heavyweight boxer to watch. I know a lot of people said he was boring and whatnot, but I just found him intriguing as a person, really, because all the stuff he come out with and how knowledgeable about life he was, I suppose. But I tend to agree, and the only fight I really would say he looked very, very good in, like that, was maybe when he beat Povetkin, then when he beat David Haye.
Yeah, well, the only thing about the Povetkin fight is it was quite an untidy fight, right?
Yeah.
There was a lot of holding and pushing, and so it was quite an awkward fight, in that sense. So it was, a lot of people look at it and it just looks so untidy. The only thing I'll say about the David Haye fight is that Vladimir Klitschko was just so much bigger than David Haye. and he was fairly kind of dominant in that fight, and but for the thing about the Joshua fight is that Vladimir Klitschko was up against a guy the same size as him, height wise, build wise, and he was Vladimir Klitschko has, since the early days of his early losses, I don't think he's ever had a challenge like that, and he very nearly beat Joshua, right? I think it was the 5th round. Joshua was literally could have been a couple of punches away from getting knocked out in that fight.
Yeah.
And I don't think Vladimir Klitschko gets anywhere near the credit that he deserves for that fight.
Yeah, and I think another thing that people don't take into account as well is he was in his 40s, and Vladimir, and Joshua was late 20s, mid to late 20s.
Yeah.
So again, I think Vladimir deserves more credit for being in that physical condition and putting in a performance like that at that age against one of the up and coming kings of the heavyweight boxing.
Yeah, and that's it. And and people just remember Klitschko for the fact that a lot of his fights were boring, and he was fighting in an era where it wasn't the 70s where you had Ali, Foreman, and Frazier, and they're just like, blah 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 blah, and he doesn't get the respect he deserves. And he fought. This is the thing about fighting is people don't realize is, especially with heavyweights, is you do what you do to win, right? You don't. Everyone expects heavyweights to be knocking its knockouts every fight, right?
Yeah.
And that's not the case. That is not the case. And this is where Deontay Wilder falls down, is because you can't literally win every fight by knockout, right? And again, it's where it's the same reason that Joshua was beaten by Andy Ruiz the first time, because Joshua knew how to fight Andy Ruiz in the first fight, and he was doing it for 2.5 rounds. And then when he knocked Ruiz down, he thought, I'll just come in and knock the guy out here before Ruiz was ready to go, right? So if, Joshua should have just stood back, realized, okay, this guy's not as hurt as I think he is.
Yeah.
Box him for a few more rounds, either go to the cards or, wear him down and knock him out later.
Yeah, and again, when people speak about AJ, I think that shows people compare him to Fury, who's been boxing all his life, really. And I think Joshua only had a handful of amateur fights, albeit he won the Olympic gold. And again, with Andy Ruiz being Mexican, they're sort of growing up on boxing as soon as they can walk. So I definitely think that with AJ, it was a tad of his inexperience showing when he lost to Ruiz.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, Tyson Fury obviously comes from a fighting family, boxing all of his life, knows the sport, is a historian of the sport. And when you see him box for the size of a guy that he is, it's incredible, really. And the same with Andy Ruiz. Okay, he might be chubby, but his style. And this is the thing about Andy Ruiz's style, he's a front foot counter puncher, right? So he walks forward at you, pressure fighter, and he throws punches once you've thrown punches. Now, the only way that you can fight that style is if you've got a granite chin, because you'll take punches, right? When someone throws a punch at you, you've got to take it to be able to get in range and throw them back, right? So, that's Andy Ruiz, and he fought Joseph Parker in New Zealand, and he didn't get knocked out in that fight. He 30 other fights that he didn't get knocked out in. So, and again, as I alluded to earlier, Mexican guys are tough, right? It's the way they're bred down there.
Yeah, speaking of Joseph Parker, how highly do you rate him? Obviously, he was the WBO champion, and he's had a couple of losses to Joshua and Dylan White.
Yeah. Well, see, it's tough to know because, as you say, the only fights that we've seen him in really, if unless you're following his career, is the fights that he's lost into Joshua and Dylan White. But I certainly rank him higher than I do Deontay Wilder because, okay, Joshua aside, if you look at the White fight, he could have had White beaten in the last round, and that's a close fight. So I when you're fighting Dillian White over 12 rounds, could have had him out of there. It was a close fight. You're up there. You're in the top 5, 6, I would say.
Yeah, I would like to see the rematch between Parker and Ruiz, and then maybe have that as an eliminator, and then throw them in the mix for a title at some point next year if we don't get the big fight.
Yeah, I mean, there are loads of really intriguing heavyweight fights that could be made, or fights in general. The problem is that you have, and this is where Wilder and Joshua have admitted, it's the PBC. It's all about networks and blah 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 and all the rest of it. I mean, I would love to see an Ortiz Parker fight or something like that, right? But the fact is, and the thing is with Deontay Wilder, he's the PBC's only pay-per-view fighter at heavyweight. They're trying to drag it out of him as much as possible. That's why he hasn't fought Joshua and why he hasn't fought White and why he hasn't fought some of the more dangerous British fighters is because every time he loses, it's another $75 down the drain that PBC aren't going to be able to charge for pay-per-view.
No. And I suppose it's a risk for them because, as you say, he's probably their biggest pay-per-view fighter. I mean, I don't really pay as close attention to American boxing as I should, but I would guess probably Errol Spence is their next biggest pay-per-view fighter, the PBC.
Yep, you're correct. Yep, and that's basically it. I mean, I can't think of any other fighters in America signed with PBC that are pay-per-view fighters. I mean Wilder's. I mean, this is the beginning of the end for Wilder. So they've only really got Errol Spence, and of course, I don't know if he's ever going to fight again, right?
I think they're lining him up against Danny Garcia.
Again, I mean, Danny Garcia. I mean, how old is Danny? I remember watching him fight Amir Khan. That must have been about 10 years ago.
Yeah. He must be. I would say he must at least be in his mid to late 30s now.
Who's going to pay for Danny? I mean, is he fighting at welterweight or what is he doing? He's not top of whatever division he's in. I don't know who he's going to fight. Are they going to put him up against Manny Pacquiao?
Yeah, because I suppose the fight that everyone wants to see in welterweight is Terence Crawford against Errol Spence. But again, you got the PBC against Top Rank, so I doubt that will happen.
Yeah. So again, this is the thing. It's so annoying because they need to get this stuff sorted out and need to make these fights. And especially now after coronavirus, it's, as Eddie Hearn says, there's not going to be any tune-up fights, right?
No, absolutely.
People, you need to start taking these big fights, but it's a case of if your fighters, if they're going to put Errol Spence up against Terence Crawford, a fight in which I think Errol Spence is going to lose, especially after. I thought Errol Spence would lose that fight before he flipped his Ferrari about 100,000 times. But if Spence takes the Crawford fight now, that's only going one way. It's not even going to be competitive, I don't think.
No, I think the rumor that Crawford's going to fight Sean Porter, I think that's what they're hoping to do, and then potentially fight him next year.
I'd like to see that fight because Sean Porter's game, right?
Yeah.
There's one thing you can say about Sean Porter is his game, and the Spence Porter fight was a really good fight. But then if Crawford beats Porter, you're just back to where you were before. Where's Errol Spence?
Yeah, yeah. I think the good thing going to potentially the fight between Fury and Joshua, I think I saw Bob Arum's comments the other day, and he seemed to think that the deal could be struck for that fight within a day with MTK in the middle.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. So, Frank Warren likes to pretend that he is involved in this, but clearly he isn't, right? Because if it was down to Frank Warren, that fight wouldn't ever get made. And it's not necessarily just Frank Warren's fault. But, if it was left up to Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren to make that fight, that wouldn't happen. And, it's clear now that Bob Arum is Tyson Fury's promoter. And Frank Warren does the promoting on the UK side, but negotiations would be made with Bob Arum, so that'll get done quite easily. MTK mediating in the middle as well will only help it.
Yeah, and I think with Frank Warren, Bob Arum said that he wants to be there at the table, but I think that will just make things harder because knowing Frank Warren, he would want to make sure he's got a better seat than Eddie Hearn. I think that's how petty.
Well, I think Frank Warren will just be told. Really, Now, the thing is, the weird thing about the Frank Warren Eddie Hearn disagreement is Frank Warren's beef is not actually with Eddie Hearn.
No.
It's with Barry Hearn, right? And Barry Hearn doesn't have anything to do with this anymore. But Frank Warren is so bitter about whatever happened between them back in the day. And I don't, when, back in whenever it was the 80s and the 90s, I didn't follow boxing to that as I do now, where I know everything that's happening in promoters' lives and, who's making. So, Frank Warren's carrying a beef into over to Eddie Hearn that's with his father, right? And it's just like, come on. Do you know what I mean? Just it's the guy's dad. He's not his dad. Okay, you probably don't like him. He takes the piss. He's a Cockney lively lad. And you're, 30 years older than him. But your beef's not actually with Eddie Hearn. So let's try and do some business here.
Yeah, and surely if this fight can get made, because it would benefit Frank Warren, because I believe that his promotional company is virtually on its knees finance-wise. So surely he will want this fight to happen so he can get whatever percentage he will get out of it. And then, in his eyes, he can revive his boxing promoting career.
Yeah, I totally agree. But I don't think Frank Warren sees it that way, right? And this is a downfall of human beings is that when you hold a grudge that's so bad that you are literally willing to let your company go under because of it. It's incredible. I find it incredible.
Yeah.
Because Queensberry Promotions, I mean, I haven't personally looked into the finances, but everything I've watched in the news and from media outlets, YouTube, one of them, is Queensberry Promotion are struggling. And this would obviously be, that this would obviously alleviate things a bit. And, and every time there's an interview with Frank Warren, he gives an interview that just makes it harder for Matchroom in Queensberry to do any business because he just either slags off Matchroom fighters or just just negative. That's all it is negative.
Yeah, I don't know if you see, but the boxing manager Sam Jones that manages Joe Joyce amongst others. One of his recent signings has signed with Matchroom, and Frank Warren was just so bitter about it because so far Sam Jones has never worked with Eddie Hearn, and he lost out on this.
Okay.
But for something as small as that to set you off, it just shows what.
Yeah, I mean, it's just. I mean, this is the thing. Look, and especially if anyone's worked Now, I'm not a businessman, right? I work for a company, but I know how the company works, right? And business is business, right? It doesn't matter what's happened previously or what's happening. If you need to make deals that will benefit, if it makes a deal that will benefit both your businesses going forward, and you've had beef in the past and it's not worked before, but if you can come to something going forward, then you do it, right?
Yeah.
It's not personal. This is the thing: is business is not personal, right? And it's somebody try and compare it to the mafia, so to say. But it's probably a more well-known example is, hey, it's just business. It wasn't personal, right? Type thing. And that's how businesses run in these days. You can't hold grudges over things. Nothing gets done.
No, and you don't have to even like the people. Once you do the business, and if you benefit from it financially, surely you should look at the bigger picture and not hold grudges or let things like that get in the way of potentially your business surviving or going under.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's it. And it's not good for anyone. I mean, even if Queensberry were to go under and we wouldn't have boxing on BT anymore, although it wouldn't be a huge loss, it's still it's still some fight nights on Saturday that I won't be able to watch anymore, right? Even if some of them are crap. But it's no one wins, right? Even if
No.
Frank Warren goes under, there's no winner there. Okay, Matchroom maybe do, because they'll probably get more fighters, but for the it's just not good for anyone.
No. And to my knowledge, I don't even think Frank Warren's announced anything about shows coming back yet, has he?
No, I mean, I was scouring YouTube today to see if there was anything new going around, but it was all just IFL and everyone commenting on what Joshua said at the recent rally. So I may have missed something there. But no, I don't think. I mean, Frank Warren doesn't have the capacity to do what Eddie Hearn's doing, right? He doesn't have the motivation. He doesn't have what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know if it's innovation, or it just doesn't have the.
Yeah, I don't think he has the creativity to do anything like that. I mean, he shows in the leisure centre that he does. I mean, if he's going to come back there, that's going to be no different from what he was doing pre-coronavirus, because watching it with 5 people, I don't think it's going to make much of a difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, what do you think about the? I don't think we spoke about this, but what did you make of the Dubois Joyce fight that would have happened? It was one I was quite interested to see, in the fact that it was a bit of a step up for Dubois compared to who he has been fighting. Although I don't actually rate Joyce as that great a fighter. But personally, what did you make of that? Was that something you? I mean, I wouldn't have paid for it personally, but it was sort of teetering on the edge of being quite an intriguing fight.
Yeah, I was looking forward to it. I think it's been completely shelved now,
Yeah.
because I see something about Martin Bakole wants to fight Joe Joyce. But going back to the original fight, I think probably Daniel Dubois would have won, but I definitely think it would have been competitive. I think Joe Joyce would have had his moments in the fight, but I just think he's just too static and too upright to do anything major in the heavyweight division, especially.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that Joe Joyce, he is very clunky, and there's not a lot of movement there. I think he would stand in one place for too long. And Daniel Dubois, though I don't think he is going to be the fighter that a lot of people think he will be, I think he would end up stopping Joe Joyce, personally.
Yeah, I don't know if you watched his fight with Nathan Gorman, but I think
Yes, I did. Yeah, I did.
I think the Joe Joyce fight would have played out similar to that one.
Yeah, has Gorman been out since? I haven't seen anything of Nathan Gorman since that fight.
No, no, I think he's back training, but I don't think he's ever had any fights scheduled or anything since.
Yeah, is he, because he, I mean, I don't know, get things wrong, but is he part of the Fury family, or is he?
Yeah, I think he's a cousin. I think he said before.
Okay, yeah, yeah, because that was, that was looked to be a bit of a step up for Dubois at the time, and but he's just again, Dubois is just too big and powerful for him, right? Because Dubois is a big man, and he does hit hard, but he's quite limited. Like, this is what, like, I laugh when people I've had someone say to me, Anthony Joshua is just another Frank Bruno, right? And I'm like, oh my God, guys, you really don't know what you're talking about. Now, Dubois, I would say, is more of a Frank Bruno than Joshua is, because Joshua is far more athletic than Frank Bruno was.
Yes, yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and and Dubois is, I don't know if it's just the style or something. He looks a bit kind of clunky, and Joshua was clunky in his earlier days. But I mean, if you want to look at Joshua now, I mean, if you look at that second Ruiz fight, um, that would just give you all the evidence you need, because he was extremely, he was light-footed in that fight and can move, and it's just, I don't see Dubois doing that. And this is another thing that is intriguing about the AJ Fury fight, is because the longer this goes on before Joshua fights Fury, the more Joshua is going to learn, right? So I think the longer it goes on, the more chance he has of beating Fury.
Yeah, I agree there. Realistically, if we was to see that fight, I can't see it happening till at least maybe June next year.
Yeah, and it needs. We had the whole debate over whether it would happen. It's got to happen in England, surely, and it's got to be in Wembley, because if you look at the Klitschko fight as an event, it was incredible, right? You can't have two British fighters fighting on foreign ground, and that would dis. I mean, okay, if they have it now, it maybe wouldn't do so well, obviously, because there's not any spectators. But
No.
if you get to next year and the economic situation has, say, it's picked up a bit, right? And you've got people working and da 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 da, and if you can get 90,000 in Wembley, and you can get the pay-per-view figures, I think the pay-per-view record is held by, what is it, Joshua Klitschko or Joshua Ruiz?
Yeah, I think it's him and Klitschko.
Yeah, so that'll be smashed, right? Fury Joshua, I mean, I think it will break the pay-per-view record by some considerable distance. I think it, like, not just 100,000 or so. I think you're talking. I think it's over 2 million.
Yeah, and I think I would go far to say if it doesn't happen in Britain, it could be potentially detrimental to British boxing having
Yeah,
it abroad.
yeah. I mean, as I say, the only thing people would be willing to accept is if they had the fight during this outbreak, and that it had to happen in, say, Saudi Arabia or somewhere like that, right?
Yeah,
I mean, you can't, or at least if they had a first fight and then a second fight in Britain, it needs to be in Britain. Surely, two British fighters fighting. They could even come up to, well, we don't have a stadium big enough in Scotland, but they could put 50,000 in Hampden Park easily. And neither of the two guys are Scottish. Neither of them are Scottish, and there's this myth that all Scottish people hate English people, which is just completely not true. But if they decided to come up to Hampden, say we've got much lower cases of coronavirus than England do. Easily, Hampden holds 50,000. I don't know if you get some people on the, the surrounding areas, you might get that up to 60,000. If they're on the pitch, easily. That would sell out in.
Yeah, and I think, I suppose, another stumbling block they might have for Wembley is if they ever get the Euros up and going again. I think UEFA have a hold of Wembley for much of the summer because of that. The only other place in England where it could potentially be is Twickenham, the rugby stadium.
Yeah. Well, put it on at the Emirates where my team play, so you'll get 60,000 there anyway.
Yeah, well, that might please Frank Warren in, because he's an Arsenal fan, isn't he?
Yeah, that's the only thing. That's the only thing that me and Frank Warren actually agree about. And I found that ironic. This is some of the things I was watching some of his IFL interviews. This is how bad it got right in lockdown, and people might say I'm sad, but sometimes I would watch old Frank Warren interviews to see him and Kugan Cassius discussing, what was happening with Arsenal. At the end of the interview, I just skipped straight to the end. It'd be like Kugan would be like, "All right, Frank, been to the Emirates recently?"
Yeah. Wasn't there a time as well when he refused to be interviewed by Kugan when he first started doing it?
Yeah, I probably think so. I mean, there was that time. Do you remember when there were some interviews going around where, they'd be interviewing Eddie Hearn and he'd be like, "Why don't you ask this question of some of your other promoters, right?"
Yeah.
And like, "Yeah, I do." So, and they suggested without actually saying that, your interviews are QC'd by other other promoters, and it was clearly obvious who they were talking about. So, and then so you were looking at it, and then you thought, well, Coogan does an interview. Once he's edited it, it's got to be watched by Frank Warren before he's allowed to post it. He's allowed to post it, and it was just like, oh my god, it's so petty, isn't it?
Yeah, it's absolutely. And I suppose with Frank Warren, he has to have everything his way. I suppose it's his generation, but
Yeah.
I can't see how other promoters can enjoy doing business with him.
No, I mean, I don't know why. I don't know why fighters. Well, let's say I don't know why fighters sign with him, but obviously they're leaving in their droves. Billy Joe Saunders, Josh Warrington. I mean, Josh Warrington. I mean, Billy Joe Saunders, fair enough, right? The guy's controversial. He's a hot potato. If anyone's gotten a bit for Josh Warrington to go over the other side, that's incredible.
Yeah, and it was funny because I think he only signed with him 18 months previous. Frank Warren, all his interviews was like, "Take that out of the air, and I've got one of the best British boxers." And then he does, 6 months later, he returned to Matchroom, which I found hilarious.
Yeah. It was, and it's just, I mean, Frank Warren, I mean, where did he go from there, right? Because, I mean, I'm just trying to think. So you've got Daniel Dubois, Anthony Yard, and can you think of another fighter that you're even remotely excited about in Frank Warren's stable?
No, not at the top of my head, I can't. No.
Whereas if you go through the Matchroom stable, you've got Joshua, you've got White, you've got just before we even get away from heavyweights, Joshua White, Povetkin's fighting there. He'll get Joe Parker, even though he's not promoted by Matchroom. He will, Joe Parker will do business with Matchroom, no problem whatsoever.
Yeah.
But Derek Chisora, Alexander Usyk, who again not promoted, kind of co-promoted by Matchroom, and who is one of my favorite fighters.
Yeah.
He'll get David Price. Okay, you could say what you say about David Price. You've got Dave Allen. And then you've got all those heavyweights, and then you can get the likes of, the people they're fighting. Eddie Hearn makes fights with multiple. He got the Oscar Rivas Dylan White fight was when that was coming up, that was like, holy shit. They're getting some pretty, the variety they've got some pretty good fights on them. Oscar Rivas was now, as much as I didn't know much about him, I knew a bit about him, and I was like, this guy's game, this guy's going to come to fight, and that'll be a good fight against Dillian White, which it was, right?
Yeah, and I think again, Dillian White, he dealt with him fairly easily.
Yeah. Now the thing for Oscar Rivas was in that fight was he was really, really game, but as soon as he felt Dillian White's power, he just kind of reined it back in a bit. And that's, as soon as he took a proper clean shot from White, Rivas was like, whoa, this is not gonna go the way the rest of my fights do, where I just pressure everyone, and just overpower them. They came up against a guy that hits very hard.
Yeah. Before we wrap this up, do you have any of the interest on the top rank card that's on early hours tonight, early tomorrow?
Oh, I didn't even know there was one tonight. What's on?
Yeah, it's a big return. Shakur Stevenson is headlining the featherweight that they tried to get Josh Warrington to fight.
Oh, right. Okay. So hold on. I'm just going to quickly look this up. Right. So I know Shakur Stevenson.
Yeah. I don't think he's fighting a featherweight in this fight, though. I think he's fighting someone that's super featherweight.
See, I'm wholly unprepared for this. So where are they fighting?
I think it's the TV studio that Top Rank have acquired.
Oh, okay. So behind closed doors kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I imagine there's not going to be anything against. It's not going to be. They're going to be doing. It's just going to be tune-ups, right? Surely.
Yeah, and one of their fighters tested positive for coronavirus as well. So
oh, did he?
It's not gone too well for him so far.
Okay, yeah. So Stevenson versus Caraballo, June 9th, super featherweight. That's the main event. Not great, is it? But yeah, so I didn't even know this was going on. It's going to be on at 5 in the morning. It's midweek through the week. So I am not going to stay up to watch it. But what I'll do is hopefully somebody posts something about the next day and I'll catch it. And this is the thing. This is the thing about boxing is that sometimes this type of card can give some pretty decent fights when you just look at it and you think, and there can be some pretty decent fights on there,
Yeah, I think they're hoping to get their fairly big cards up and running towards the end of June. I think Bob Arum said on IFL. So maybe they'll be televised over here, because I know that one in particular is not being shown on any of our normal outlets.
Yeah, so hopefully somebody posts something on YouTube tomorrow, and I'll get in about this. I'll get in about this tomorrow, because again we're starved of boxing, and I will literally watch anything right now that's new.
Yeah, and fingers crossed, as we said at the start, things continue to improve, and we've got some of our own to watch in a couple of weeks' time.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, Premier League's back, so hopefully we'll get some hopefully we'll get some half decent fights to look forward to, and then we can analyze them and not go over old ground.
Yeah. Well, I think that wraps up this weekend's edition nicely. So thanks for joining once again.
Yeah, no worries, mate. You take care of yourself, and I'm sure we'll speak again soon.
Yeah. You too. Thanks, and I'll catch you next time.
Yeah, cheers, mate.